I want to start with saying that when I was asked to talk about inclusivity and Islam as a culture, I thought that perhaps the best thing to do is to reflect upon the Quranic guidance that Allah gives us regarding this topic. Because already that within the Islamic culture, if you're an imam, then you come with a particular rank and you come with a particular voice. But then put gay in front of it and then you lose that voice. And so I don't want to speak with that voice today. I want to speak about with the authentic voice of the Quran, because that's a voice that speaks to all of us. Also, one needs to look at the trajectory Islam took in terms of sexuality. How there was a period of almost total acceptance of homosexuality between the 7th and the 9th century. And I mean, there's many poetry that has survived that period that tells us so clearly about the homoerotic experiences that people had, especially under the very feared Harun al-Rashid, the Khalif Harun al-Rashid, and how homosexuality at that time was not a punishable offense. And then we need to go further towards the 18th century when Islam moved even further into Europe, how the British colonialism has affected the sodomy laws, or introduced the sodomy laws, and that Muslims slowly came to adopt as something that is un-Islamic. And so we've inherited some of that as well. And then you go a bit further when there is the resurgence of Islam, or the rise of fundamentalism and the rise of sectarianism, and the Wahhabi movement, Salafi, and the Tabligh Jamaats, and these kind of groups trying to bring Islam back to sort of a pure Islam. And with that kind of thinking also, homosexuality started becoming something sinful.
For Muslims in the East, it's not an identity that they want to identify with. So although you have a large part of the heterosexual community, men having sex with men and women having sex with women in the East, they don't identify as gay. So what happens to queer Muslims when they hear these kind of sentiments from religious scholars? One of the ways in that queer Muslims suffer is by the interpretation of religious texts. Now we know, if you're a student of Quran, you will know that, and in the words of Dr. Fazlur Rahman Ansari, he says that anyone can interpret the Quran. It depends who interprets it, and it depends from what attitude you come with or personality you have approaching the Quran. And so if you're a person that is hostile, obviously you will read that, or you will read the Quran through the lens of your hostility. And if you're a compassionate person like the Prophet Muhammad was, you will read the Quran through the lens of compassion.
There's no record of any persecutions of eunuchs that during the time of the Prophet. It's noteworthy that under the relaxed Umayyads and the even more permissive Abbasid dynasties, and these are the dynasties that ruled immediately after the Prophet's death, to about 1258, we have no record of poets being punished for their published sexual opinions and statements, or even for their sexual activities. At all events, homosexuality seems to have been as widely practiced and accepted under the Umayyads and the Abbasids as it is in most Muslim countries today.
And so, as we can see, is that you cannot use those verses in isolation. You have to relate it to the historical facts. And when you look at the historical facts verse, it just becomes clearer on how one can actually read these verses of Sodom and Gomorrah in the Quran. And as you can also see that there was nothing in the story that related anything to sexual orientation. It was a nation that was involving in economic exploitation. They were involved in xenophobia. They were also an idolatrous nation, and the idolatrous beliefs which they came up themselves was only serving a patriarchal elite. They were unjust towards women, not looking at the sexual needs of women, and they were free to have sex with just anybody that they liked. In fact, when these corpses were dissected, it was also discovered that there was a high rate of syphilis in the city. So indicative of, and this was between the male and female corpses. So which was indicative of the fact that sex was not just between males and males, but between males and females.
And so people in the East up till today do not identify with gay relationships or even wanting to get married to the person from the same sex. But yet they would have sex with people from the same sex. And they feel that there's nothing wrong with that, as long as they still continue to have their, fulfill their social roles as men, for example, having married a woman and having children, but they're still free to have sex on the outside. So contextually, we look at relationships differently. Also, many other parts of the world, there's still a lot of role play within relationships, same-sex relationships. And I don't specifically think that there's anything wrong with role play. If it works for them, it works for them. So I think when we look at a question like that, we have to look at it also broadly and in different contexts, how people perceive relationships and how they become equal or complementary. Our approach in our organization is education and awareness. And we felt that you can't work with this issue directly with Orthodox Muslims because, as I said in the beginning, if we're not even free to talk about sex and sexuality, where are we going to talk about homosexuality and relating it to the theology of Islam? It's a very dangerous one. And you're probably going to end up most of the time with doors shut. So I think it's, as a point of strategy, it's important to talk to the people that are willing to listen, the people that are ready to listen. And I think by bringing it into a space like this, we can then talk about it. We can share our experiences and we can share our knowledge around the issue. And then perhaps one day when we have educated and created awareness for ourselves, we can then expand it to the rest of the Muslim community. But it's a very dangerous thing to just take this and go present it in a mosque or something like that. It's a very, very sensitive issue. And as I always say that it took me 29 years to come out of the closet, it probably will take them much longer to understand homosexuality. So one needs to also be patient. And if we talk about compassion and that Allah is compassion, then we should also extend that compassion to those who still need time to work through it. So it's a point of strategy. And I think what Merhaba done was excellent. To at least get this group of people together, I think it's a first step in the right direction. Why do we have a theological approach to the whole issue of homosexuality and not a human rights approach? I think in our organization we do both. I think it's very important to talk about the human rights of people. Even the Quran says that you can't force people to follow your way of life. So there's freedom of expression, there's freedom of choice, and so we need to expand that. But in our experience in the last 16 years, when people come to the counseling room and they want answers, they want to know, what does Allah say about my sexuality? Am I going to be okay? Am I going to heaven or am I going to hell? And so how did you as an imam answer those questions without using the text? You have to refer to the text. And you're absolutely right, I can refer to the text, and somebody else can come from a different perspective and refer to the text. But as I said in the beginning, how do we use the text to make society workable? And that's the reason why we have divine text in the first place. For example, the Quran says, خُذْ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ مَا هُوَ شِفَاءٌ وَرَحْمَةً لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Take from the Quran what is the healing for you as mankind and a mercy to the believers. So what do we take from the Quran then that brings mercy and healing to our society? Because if we're going to take the approach of the woman that you've mentioned, we need to ask the question, does it bring healing to our society? But when we take this approach and we read the Quran in the text, backed up with the historical facts of it, and it delivers what the Quran wants it to deliver, which is the healing for society, then surely there can't be anything wrong with that. So again, it's how we approach the Quran. What lens do we look at the Quran? and what is the aim of our interpretation.